I love this format of the notion of you and I sitting together and either having a cup of coffee or a glass of wine.
Is
Maybe
this wine or
sometimes
water?
both. This is water. If I were to open it, I'd make a mess. And the insights that others might glean.
I just made a mess
it's
of you,
really
I'm
not,
sorry.
I figured. The insights others might glean if they were to witness some of those conversations. And what a gift of ASU to present that, and GSV, Deb Quazzo in particular, to present that opportunity for us.
And I want to say, I want to just echo what Russlynn said, because we have known each other for probably an eternity. You don't look older.
Neither do you, my dear.
So,
But at least 30 years?
yeah, at least 30 years. And through lots of different iterations of reform, or this is the thing. It's kind of like the tablets from, from Moses, the 10 Commandments. And I think that what I've really appreciated in like this iteration of our relationship is just how freaking smart and strategic you are. And I often, and so I'm going to ask Russlynn the question that we talk about privately, which is, in this moment, which frankly is one that potentially erases 60 years of things that we both have fought for. What are you thinking? How are you thinking about, on some levels, both hope and fear?
It is exactly that. It is both hope and fear. It's not binary.
Right.
We have an opportunity to innovate in ways that we haven't in my lifetime, and certainly in our relationship. Technology, I mean, why we are here in this room with this magnificent set of people. Technology has finally caught up with both the moral vision, which is why I've stepped into this work, why you've stepped into this work, the policy vision, what we know the ecosystem of everything from as local to state and federal needs to look like to support innovation, the best practices and the data and research and accountability systems that tell us what works, the ability to leapfrog how we think about personalized learning in the most personalized sense, to think about fair assessments for both students and teachers that will ensure we have the best of our teachers before the students that need and depend the most on public education. States have historically, and till now, as most of us in this room know, been the arbiters of how we deliver public education.
Right.
90 to 92 cents on the
Did you
dollar.
all just hear that? You all just know that, right? That states have really been the arbiters pretty much since the Republic was started.
Having said that, there was a reason that the federal
Exactly.
government needed to step in. That is because ensuring that each and every young person in our country has the ability to fulfill their potential was a quest that was far too arbitrary when it was left solely up to states and the discretion of individual teachers, of districts, and of an ecosystem of policymakers
Right,
that didn't put equity first. So you and I, though, have while we have for many, many, many years, the idea of both of us sitting on the stage is both warm and revelatory for me, and probably quite questionable to lots of folks in this room.
Right.
But one of the things among many that I have never questioned about you, Randi, is your integrity, is your face forward on what students need, is your belief in commitment in knowing that actually what is right for teachers and what is right for students is the same.
Correct.
For too long, perhaps it has been the binary nature. For too long, it has been a sensationalism around the fights, because that's good clickbait. Now, I ask you the same question. So I have both hope and fear, but I will also say this. When I had the great privilege of being confirmed by the United States Senate for Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights, for the first African American president, for the first Secretary of Education that called out civil rights in education as one of the greatest and most important social movements of our generation, and a quest for the most perfect union. President Obama often said when he was campaigning, the story of the civil rights movement was written in our schools. And when I had the honor of holding that position, I will tell you, in those 10 regional offices, those 600 plus attorneys, investigators, and staff, they wrote the chapters. Still, when I had what was both daunting and enormously hopeful responsibility of trying to reinvigorate the Office for Civil Rights, where the archives took me was to Nixon, was to Leon Panetta when he held my seat when there was no Department of Education.
Right.
It took me to where the federal government brought out the National Guard. It took me to a speech that Richard Nixon gave, President Nixon gave at Howard University. And he said that we as a nation had to affirmatively act to eliminate the vestiges of slavery in our country. The very first time I, as trying to be both a lawyer and a student of history, saw the words affirmative action. So I ask you the same question, hope and fear.
So in these moments, over the course of the last, I would say, few months, I actually have gone back to three things actually. Number one is my own teaching. High school civics in a career and tech ed school in Brooklyn, New York, that we had to fight to keep open because it was that period of time. I am actually still on leave from teaching. I never gave up my unpaid leave, and I yearn to go back. But it was the fight to keep project-based instruction, to keep some of these career programs that were not cosmetology. They were, healthcare programs in Brooklyn, close to Downstate Hospital. And I keep thinking, so number one is I keep thinking that there has to be an opening particularly you just heard the last panel, I'm sure there's been many, many other panels, in a world of AI, the things that I taught my AP Gov course and students, critical thinking, problem solving, resilience, persistence, relationship building, the things that they learn in debate, that there has to be a way to connect with a new administration that actually believes in an alignment between high school and after high school. So that kind of sense of what's the way in? How do you create openings where people then see each other and see opportunity? So that's number one. Number two, frankly, I think about my grandparents who escaped from Ukraine, Kamnitz-Podolsk, during that period of time when my grandfather understood what was going on in terms of authoritarianism. And number three, I think about the potential, if we actually could get it right, instead of having all the words, really think about what are the concepts in a world that we're in today with so much division and so much strife. What are the things that we could actually say and do that would transcend and dissipate, can I say this word? The bullshit that goes on all the time. May I say that?
You put a few exclamations
So,
around it.
because you and I have had this conversation, and part of the strength of us doing this work together that you've been doing in high schools, that I've been doing in high schools, is that what is it that kids need to know and be able to do? It's, if we think about this not in terms of what the rubrics and the standards, I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't do rigorous.
I mean,
You know
girl,
that.
You know me.
You know that.
And
But
really.
I'm not saying that. You know that. Because because we've had a bit of this conversation all the time.
And we have to measure the rigor. And we have to know kids that look like me, that think like me, that come from families like me, that grew up like I did.
Every
Poor
single
immigrant
get
the same thing.
Every single student I taught.
All right.
Exactly right.
There we go.
And every single student I taught got to 4th place in a national competition on We the People. Every single student I taught.
And what does it take to do that and scale it today?
Exactly. So 2 concepts and rigor. What if we had safe and welcoming schools? Look, 90% of the kids in America go to public schools. What if they were all safe and welcoming? What if we made that a North Star? And instead of talking about a litany of the different kids that there are, just thinking about acceptance of all kids and making it safe for all kids, including against bullying, including against guns, including against all of that, but safe and welcoming. And the second is, and this is a big difference from where I think everyone in education has been for the last 30 years. COVID broke us. What if we started thinking about schools as how we make them engaging and relevant?
Yep.
Engaging and relevant. And this is what I've learned, and I'll stop here, but this is what I've learned. Career tech ed is some of the best examples of how you actually make things engaging and relevant. And 95% of kids who go to these qualified career tech ed programs, graduate from high school, 70% go to college. So in some ways, they have it all. But what do they do in those programs that like regular high schools don't?
Well, first, I mean, the Academy of Sciences has proven to us that this kind of experiential learning is actually how you absorb the cognitive skills that we think you only get through core subjects.
Exactly.
Like math and higher order sciences and literacy. So the mix between application and comprehension is now proven by every part of science of learning. But we come from a history that has sorted and selected students by a potential that was based on a perception that was based on a very old bias. Otherwise, the achievement gap would not look the way that it does, right? It defies conventional science of humans.
But if we find ways to create, to open the aperture, and look, you're doing this. Moses at Edison High School, who is an XQ school and one of my favorite schools in New York City. If we open the aperture so that high school, that kids in high school, that kids had choices in high school, in junior high school, that they could pursue something really significant, whether it was, a dual college, AP, IB, whatever, or whether it was in career work, in cyber. I mean, we're all talking,
That's right.
You all in this room spend a lot of time in AI. Believe it or not, we spend a lot of time in the union in AI, and we've just done our second common sense guardrails that teachers around the country have done in terms of how we deal with AI. Not how we fight it, but how we engage in it, and how we also make sure that the guardrails, including on privacy, are there, and on disinformation. But what if we could find ways that if a kid wanted to go into cybersecurity, if a kid wanted to be a technician at Micron and really understand how to do that, if a kid wanted to be a welder, instead of waiting till after high school to start a pre-apprenticeship program, why don't we do that as part of high school? Just like we do dual enrollment for college, why don't we do dual enrollment in that way? And wouldn't that start changing some of this division that we now have between private and public, between, rural and urban, and all of a sudden we start fighting for the same funding? Shouldn't we have clean rooms in high schools and have that funding from Career Tech Ed instead of that funding going bye-bye? Shouldn't we have that?
No doubt. And so these are the kinds of conversations that has to make that happen. And this is the opportunity to do it. Having said that, the system in which schools operate, in which innovative places that do this kind of workplace learning, experiential learning that both brings rigor and social emotional skills, what we call competencies, what we know now most employers are looking at. We used to call them, again, social emotional. These are things like critical thinking, problem solving, the ability to work in a team. At XQ, we call them the learner outcomes.
Right. I really hate when people call them soft skills, since they are essential skills.
It's awful, but that's why I said we used to. That's why I said we used to, right? We're working on the vernacular to actually, again, meet us where technology is. The ecosystem needs to change, not just in those kinds of expectations, in the assessments of how we measure real-world skills, skills-based assessments, in the kinds of learning experiences that allow teachers and students to actually innovate and think about interdisciplinary learning the way we credentialize learning right now. We're still doing it based on time, hundreds and some odd years.
So let me ask you a question, which is, in this moment, take this room. I'm sure that there are a bunch of people in this room saying, oh, that's nice. They can come up with a nice little pilot. How do we, particularly since states have run schools for a long time, and now they're going to have more authority to run schools, hopefully we will keep the money, which is what I've been fighting for day and night, because we need public schools to have the public dollars that they have. But I digress. How do we get states to actually do this work that you and I, after years of watching and being involved and engaged in how to help kids learn and achieve and have opportunity, how do we create sustainable, scalable schools so that kids have these opportunities.
Listen, we have the evidence.
Yes,
We
do.
have the know-how. We have the science of learning. We have the data, despite the lack of information coming in the way that we want to see it and have historically seen it. We've also heard commitments from the new Secretary of Education saying that research and data matter, which is actually the origins of the Department of Public Education in the first place.
Correct.
We have commitments saying, and we know...
Wait. Johnson also said resources.
We
Research,
have commitments,
data, and
and
resources.
we know, at least, that under continuing resolution, the same amount of dollars around the same amount of pockets will go. We also know...
From your mouth to God's ears.
We also know, well, that's continuing resolution. I think it might be Congress. Having said that, we also know that at a minimum, these titles, Title I, Johnson, when he first announced the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, what some of us know as IASA under Clinton, Improving America's Schools, No Child Left Behind, when it was reauthorized under President Bush, ESSA under Obama. It is a constitutionally endowed title.
Completely
Title
agree.
II, about teachers. IDEA, about students with disabilities. Civil rights. American education.
Wait, and let's not forget English acquisition, which is one of the titles as well, that we absolutely need. 5.5 million kids every single day are getting funding and resources so that they can learn English.
And so, these titles, right, the executive order was about a plan to Congress. It is, the onus is on us, the populace, to identify a plan and help articulate it that works for all kids in each and every community everywhere.
Yes.
And so, that is our work ahead. We have no choice at this point. This idea of states, absolutely. My notion is you go into every state. We have spent the better part of 5 years now really studying the success, not just of XQ schools when they began graduating.
Wait. Before I just want to, somebody just said yes over there. I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm watching
You
the time.
always do, and I
Before
like it.
that, what I heard you just say, which I think is absolutely imperative, is that we on a national level have to have that kind of role to keep on keeping on, to keep on fighting to ensure that every student has opportunity, which is
100%.
the core foundational federal role from the 1960s.
Absolutely. And it is very much about high schools. We were the first in the world, as you know, to do universal high school, to actually make it a fundamental right according to every state constitution, that this country will invest in the brain power of the people, citizens or not, with Plyler versus Doe, that come to our public school
Exactly right.
doors, wrapped around the notion of fairness and equality as enforced by civil rights. Those are fundamental truths in our country, and I don't suspect that anybody here or there can or will overturn them. So it's holding on to the hope. It's building on the innovation in this room. It's knowing that we have the science. We have the data. We know what works for kids in this country. States now will be responsible for doing it. We have spent a very long time trying to think about what does the new version of high school success look like? High school as a fulcrum to change everything that comes before it, K-8, and everything after it. college and the workforce prep and beyond, so
Exactly
that
right.
people can live their potential.
So that is the hope that overcomes the fear that the work that the two of us in various different ways have done, so that we have the science, we have the evidence, we have the knowledge about what works. What we don't yet have is the political will to make it happen.
But what we also haven't had is all of us facing the same direction. And I think that's happening now. The adult fights have to go. That's the bullshit, Randy. And we've known that for a really long time.
Well, you and I have known that. Now the question is, given that we, and I see our time is up, given that, and part of the reason we were doing this today with all of you is that there have been times that we've been on opposite sides, but we see what works in schooling now, and we see what works to create huge opportunity for every single child. And the real question will be, can we get the powers that be to actually see that as well?
But seeing is believing. And it's actually the people in this room, in this conference,
That's right.
that will bring the making to bear that shows fairness, accountability, acceleration on the skills that we know our students need to know and be able to do, to continue to make sure that this country is as great as it is, because it
That's
wouldn't
right.
be but for public education.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, ladies.